Are you satisfied with your understanding of sustainability? If you are not, imagine a journey together, a pluralistic one, with academia, innovators, startups, NGOs, all looking for solutions to the greatest challenge of our time. My name is Samuele Tini, and this is the Sustainability Journey. Welcome to another episode, and today we are going to discuss agriculture, data, and how value chains and how to improve value chains in a sustainable way. And we do it with David Taylor, who is the head of sales and business development for Agritask in the Europe and Middle East and Africa region. Thank you so much, David, for being here with us.
No, thank you for having me.
And Agritask is quite an innovative company. You will discuss about that, how you track the supply chain, especially for bigger businesses, and the discussion that are really important on how to give value, especially for the farmers and for sustainability. But the first question, as usual, who is David? How you have become a leader in this space?
Oh, thank you. So I've gone on a very winding journey, which I feel is often the case for people who now work in sustainability. It's a reasonably new field within most businesses. So around 15 years ago, I joined a company that specialized in product specifications for supermarkets. So if you think about all of the products you see on the shelves in your local supermarket, they've got the ingredients, the nutrition, and that business knows where they're sourcing the different ingredients from. And the business that I worked for helped those supermarkets to engage the suppliers about various initiatives, of which often that included sustainability. So for the first 10 years of that business, it was around engaging suppliers to complete the data and make sure it was accurate. And that ranged from everything from country of origin, about where the ingredients are from, so that they can put claims on the packaging, all the way through to things like the horse meat scandal here in the UK, where they found that horse was fraudulently being included within some beef burgers and other related products. In 2020, I began my executive MBA, which I decided to focus on sustainable supply chains. And it was through that work we identified that most businesses were going to need to increase the amount of sustainability data that they collected from their supply chain. And that started a really exciting journey to solely focus just on that sustainability data, particularly around things like carbon emissions and scope 3, so emissions from the value chain.
Fantastic, fantastic. And as you said, it's really greenfield, a field for everybody and bringing together different perspectives, really focusing on the solutions that really enhance sustainability. And Agritask is at the forefront, adopting data, working with companies in the value chain, working with farmers. Can you explain for our audience a bit more about Agritask?
Yeah, absolutely. So after 15 years of working with supermarkets at the bottom end of the value chain, I really wanted to get closer to the source of where the environmental and social impacts are normally more acute. So with the farmers, and Agritask specialize in helping businesses to get better visibility about what's going on at the farm level, but also then increase the influence about how the different farming practices are implemented. And that could be to increase the consistency and resilience of supply. So making sure that you've got the right amount of crop-based raw material turning up your processing facility, or more increasingly, that could be to make sure that the way those crops and raw materials are grown are as sustainable as possible.
Fantastic. And I can see a crucial role on that, on how to certify, especially businesses, especially for very critical value chains where maybe deforestation has become in the debate now a critical issue, especially for consumers and for legislators as well. So can you discuss a bit the challenges and the opportunity for the agri-food sector and why it's so important, and how Agritask has developed his approach and trying to resolve the issues that we can see every day on the products that we put on our plate?
Yeah, absolutely. And businesses are coming under a perfect storm. On one sense, they're realizing that to disclose to their shareholders and stakeholders and the wider market that they need a level of engagement with their supply chain deeper than ever before. Most businesses, their competency is managing their tier one suppliers, those directly that they buy the raw materials from. But as the level of detail they need around carbon emissions, about their impact on biodiversity increases, they need to start going right the way down the value chain to the farmers so that they can understand the way that everything's being grown. And then on the other side, you have the fact that the regulations are often still in flight, they're still evolving. So you mentioned deforestation. EUDR, the EU deforestation regulation, is a perfect example of this. There's a clear requirement on businesses to know where key commodities come from. And yet, whilst we're in the year where it needs to be implemented by businesses, there's still questions that are outstanding for businesses about how that regulation in practice is going to be implemented. And this is causing multiple challenges. They don't have enough visibility, but also everything's still moving at the same time so that they don't know necessarily how it will look in practice.
Fantastic, David. And I want to go a bit deeper, just to understand also the role of the technology on one side and the work that you are doing, especially on Agritask. How does it work? How you bridge this gap between the enterprises that now, as you say, they're under this perfect storm, regulator are on their neck, consumers, they rightly want to see that they are consuming products that are sustainable, and the growers, the supplier, and how you bridge the gap within these two reality, and which are the challenges that you have to overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first challenge, you've mentioned data a few times, the breadth and depth of data that businesses need to validate, report, evidence the different claims, where they need to spend their energy to reduce their impact on the environment and have a more positive social impact within the value chain, there's just so much data. And as businesses going on focusing on the low-hanging fruit where they can have biggest impact to the long tail of their supply chain and working with more of their suppliers, that problem's only growing. So when you think about how to quantify that impact, there's just so many different data sources that you need to access. So the first thing that Agritask does is we're really good at aggregating all those different sources of data. The first place we look is remote data, because ultimately we want to minimize the burden that we have on farmers. So we use things like satellite imagery to understand what's going on the ground where possible. If we can't get the data we need from there, we then have a mobile application which helps to collect the supplementary data to augment what we're getting from the remote sensing. And then thirdly, we then look to things like the ERP systems or the PLM system, so the internal system that our customer uses to manage their internal data. Or we look to farm management systems where more mature markets, like in Europe, the farmer may already be capturing some of the data. And in effect, we're consolidating all of those different data points, and then we're bringing it into a format where the brand, the processor, the business that wants to better understand their farmers can actually do something with it. In that middle section, it's all about how do we interpret that and start to understand insights. And again, the way I like to think about it is businesses trying to understand, am I going to have enough raw material? Is it going to be of the right quality and specification? And is it grown sustainably? So once we've consolidated that data, we run it through various different models. And the bit that really excites me, and I've had a huge pleasure geeking out about over the last year as I've learned more about Agritask's product, is a lot of it is based in agronomy. So if you think about the way plants grow, the way humans can best support plants to grow, it's great to leverage the natural world to best understand how you make sure you get the right amount at the right quality, grown in a sustainable way. And once you have those insights, because you've established that channel with growers already, you then have a channel to start influencing the way that they cultivate those crops so that they can have the education and insights that they need to do it in a more sustainable, lower impact way.
Fantastic. And let's see this augmented, let's say, agronomic data that you are trying to work and you are collecting from farmers. It's really a way where you can enhance agriculture and the decision making of farmers. Maybe on that, can you explain a bit more how, and maybe if you have also some examples on how you have benefited some of the farmers and the work?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first joined Agritask, one of the crops I went into a lot of detail on was potatoes. we've got a really good partnership with HZPC, which is the world's largest seed potato grower. And they do a lot of work around growing more sustainable varieties and developing ways of cultivating potatoes that minimize the impact of it. And one thing that we do for them is we've basically digitized that knowledge in a form that farmers can access more easily. The way that businesses used to do this is, I'm sure we've all experienced this, is we're sent a huge dozen-page specification and best practice guide with loads of tables, or a spreadsheet with a dozen different tabs. And farmers who are understandably very busy, they look at that and go, no, I'm just going to do it the way that I've already done for the past 30 years. And they have a huge amount of knowledge and experience, but actually what our partners like HZPC have is a huge amount of innovation and experience with these new varieties. And what we do is, by digitizing that through the digital agronomic advice in an app form, we just make it much easier for farmers to access the latest knowledge and information in a way that they can just be sat in their farmer and go, right, what's the optimal distance to space these potato seeds based on my type of soil, based on the specific seed that I'm growing? What's the right time for home killing, which is a potato term for when you basically chop all the leaves off above the surface to promote the growth of the potato? What's the right amount of nitrogen supply that balances yield and quality with the environmental footprint of using nitrogen-based fertilizers? So again, it's just taking this knowledge and making it really accessible in a way that really works for farmers and the way actually they go about growing their various crops.
You can see how you use data really to enhance practices. And I want to go now, we have discussed a bit the farmers, we'll go back, especially for the small scale farmer discussion. I want to go to the business side. Agritask is partnering with the big names, big household names of the food and beverage companies. And especially in the critical part that we discussed before, the overseeing the agricultural supply and of course mitigating their risks, especially in the face of the regulation. And I would like to ask, can you share some stories on how you do this job, of course, and which are the key success stories for you within your 2 years work now with 4 years now with Agritask?
Absolutely. And one of the areas which I've found most rewarding is around Scope 3 carbon emissions. And that's because I've seen it at all ends of the value chain. So a lot of the work I did in my previous role was about developing ways for businesses to start measuring Scope 3 emissions. And now, as the market and the customers have matured in their understanding and their capabilities, businesses increasingly want to get to that next level of detail. So if you think about carbon emissions, they're categorized into 3 different scopes. And scope 3 is basically all of the upstream emissions coming from your supply chain and all of the downstream emissions for the use of that product. And the bit that Agritask are really good at understanding is those upstream emissions. As businesses need to increase the amount of data and evidence that they have around their carbon emissions, the numbers that you see in the annual reports, they are being forced by regulations like the CSRD here in the EU and the SEC in the US are increasingly progressing on the requirements there. You're going to need to collect more primary data. And by that, I mean collecting data directly from farmers about the specific activities that they're doing in the fields, and therefore using that to derive the carbon emissions. So what Agritask do is we use a combination of data from the farmer using our mobile app with data that they're already providing in their farm management system so that we're minimizing that burden. And then we're using that through a carbon calculator to more accurately assess the carbon emissions. And what this is helping businesses to do is, first of all, have more confidence in terms of the numbers that they're reporting of, so they don't underestimate it or overestimate it, but also more accurately identify where they can really have an impact. So that may be fertilizers. And by working with farmers in this way, you're already starting that conversation with farmers and helping them to better understand what practices are going to be most beneficial in terms of adapting and evolving to reduce that carbon impact and start to decarbonize our food system.
Fantastic. And it's really important, and from the business side, especially, to be confident and avoid the risk of some backlash from consumers or regulators as well. And you say also for farmers is good because the promotion of practices that are more sustainable and more tailored towards their own say ecosystem, the work and the way they are working. So I want to ask this question. One of the things that is often especially for value chains and especially for some products coming maybe from emerging market, it is which are the benefits for small scale farmers. Sometimes we feel we think of them being having the shorter part of the stick and being sometimes exploited. So how especially platform like Agritask and your work can really support and giving them the benefits and support them to have a win-win situation within all the value chain, which is also beneficial for the company, especially from the social side.
Absolutely. And often businesses, particularly in sectors where there's coffee or cacao used in chocolates, there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of smallhold farmers who are operating on plots the size of 1 hectare, maybe 5 if it's a more mature one. And that means that brands and larger businesses who do have a responsibility to the economic security and the well-being of those smallholders, because ultimately they're contributing to the success of their brand, they have a real problem of scale. It's really hard for these sustainability or sourcing teams to provide the right level of support to these businesses. So the great thing about something like Agritask is the fact that, first of all, you can better understand the unique circumstances of each smallhold farmer. For me personally, it's really important to not treat smallhold farmers as a homogenized mass that can all be treated in the same way. They're all individual people with their own businesses, their own preferences, and their own aspirations. And therefore, it's important not for brands to, first of all, dictate how they should run their business, nor simply think that they can provide the same advice or guidance. So first of all, by collecting data about all of these smallhold farmers in a constructive and helpful way, you can better understand the different types of support. A really good example of this is we did a project with a very large coffee brand in South America, whereby through the work with a third party, we collected lots of different soil samples around the smallhold farmers. And what that allowed us to understand was what were the specific soil needs of all of these different farms. We aggregated that data and then used an agronomic model that had been digitized within our platform to automatically provide tailored advice to each of those different smallhold farmers. So basically, you went from a world where the smallhold farmer always bought the big green bag from the market because that's what his father did, and ultimately that's kind of the way they've already done it, to understanding actually the soil health meant that a different fertilizer would mean that they had to apply less, so they're saving money, which is good for them, but also they'd have a more productive crop as well, so they're making more money there. So in effect, what you're doing is you're benefiting the smallhold farmer because they're spending less, their soil's getting healthier, which is an asset to them, but also you are reducing the carbon emissions of that specific farm. So when you think about the value chain emissions and all of these brands and businesses trying to achieve net zero, you're benefiting them as well. So you're really creating that win-win scenario in a thoughtful and tailored way across tens of thousands of smallhold farmers.
Fantastic, and it's really interesting, and especially for us here in Africa, as you say, coffee, tea, cacao, and other. There are really the commodities where they have been in the past and still in some controversy. So really having tailor-made decision and supporting the livelihood of farmers, it's really important because sometimes they are the backbone of the economy. And David, I want to ask now a personal question. So for our audience and people, they might be getting excited and say, wow, this is really important. Those factors are often overlooked, but they are critical because we know that agriculture is one of the bigger emitters and is the way we shape the food that we put in our plate, and so important even for cultural, livelihood, and especially even for nations. So it's quite an important sector, especially for us here. And which advice do you want to give to our audience, to our listener, maybe somebody that's interested even in your sector, how we can leverage, how we can improve our operation, or at a personal level, what we can do?
I think the biggest opportunity for sustainability professionals, and I alluded to this a moment ago, is to become more commercially literate. The more we can articulate the direct impact of our work to the company's bottom line, the more success we will have in the adoption of our programs, both internally with our senior leadership teams, but also along the value chain as well. Sustainability needs to make good business sense, otherwise it won't in itself be sustainable. It's a very additive activity at the moment. We have sustainability departments, we have sustainability reporting, and the exciting things is things like CSRD, which is bringing double materiality, about bringing the fact that you've got the financial responsibilities and the environmental and social responsibilities. It's bringing that together. And the more that we can do that with our activities to embed our practices within the sourcing and the procurement and the technical and the engineering teams, the more we will have success in making our businesses more responsible and sustainable. So yeah, for me, just read annual reports, understand the kind of things that your C-suite and your VPs are talking about in your annual reports. What are the risks? And if you've got an agricultural value chain, climate volatility is going to be on there. And therefore, the work that we do around making our food systems more regenerative are going to be absolutely key, because that makes our crops more resilient, which makes our raw material supply more predictable, which ultimately makes our businesses more profitable and secure, which helps to get you a seat at that table at the strategic level of your business.
Fantastic, David. Thank you so much for this really insightful episode. Those are often overlooked areas which are not under the spotlights, but they are really critical to advance the work of sustainability and how really we respond to the challenges that you have also mentioned and discussed. So thank you so much, David. It's been a pleasure and honor having you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.